We'd like to start with this Zen story. I have it on the phone, even better. And it is a very valid, typical story. It is told in many ways. I got it from a Zen book by Suzuki or Kadowaki, both great teachers of traditional Zen. It seems to me that Baldassar probably much appreciated and possibly even knew Kadowaki. And you know it, the story. I propose it to you in this version. There are several versions, all good when you don't attach to them, otherwise they are all bad. And it titles, "A laughter is the answer." An ancient tradition exists in some Japanese Zen monasteries, claiming the following. If a wandering monk manages to win a debate on Buddhism with one of the monastery monks, he wins an overnight stay, otherwise he has to go back on his path. Pay attention, because everything is very symbolic, as well as being of historical value. There was one of these monasteries in the north of Japan, managed by two brothers. The oldest was very erudite, and the youngest was a muppet and, on top of that, purblind in one eye. These are ancient texts, because today we don't use purblind anymore. As some years ago we used to say nigger, and today we don't say it anymore. Today purblind sounds like an offense, so I'm sorry, this is a text from the 70s and it still uses this sort of language, alright? One night a wandering monk arrived thereabouts, begging for hospitality. The oldest brother was very tired, the cultured, erudite one, because he had been studying the entire day. The erudite ones are always studying. The ever-studying erudite is not as the knowledge man who can use studying. The erudite still hasn't perceived that the mind will not lead him to the truth. Thus, he always thinks about finding a concept about the truth. He has always books, theories, he's always telling others how they should live, and so on. This is what transforms God in a concept about God. This is symbolically the erudite brother. He is tired because he is always studying, that is, somehow, he is tired because he is never stopping the doing. Everything is symbolic. Obviously, the two brothers represent two sides within us. So, bring your attention to the story. The screen went black. The oldest brother was very tired because he had been studying the entire day. For this reason, he said to the youngest one, the blind one, he would be in charge for the debate, and warned him, "Make sure that your dialogue happens in silence." Being ignorant and stupid, the Muppet would have made a fool of himself if speaking. You notice? The Muppet, the ignorant, the simple one as it is called in the Gospels, which does not mean that every simple man is a Muppet, shares at a lower level the same quality a wise man has on a higher level. A Muppet doesn't follow blindly the mind, not because he witnessed that the mind doesn't lead to truth, as a wise man did, rather because he hasn't entered the mental debate yet. Alright? Thus, the Muppet shares a quality on a lower level that a wise man, meaning he who has discovered the truth, has on a higher level. Neither of them is a lot in the mind, but we could say that somehow the Muppet is still a bit below it, and the wise man is beyond it, meaning he uses it as a tool, as a hand, as a knee, as an elbow, as a lever, and so on, but it doesn't live by it. Symbolically, this applies to each one of us. We will understand this better in a minute. Some hours later, the wayfarer turned up to the oldest monk, saying, "Your brother is truly extraordinary." And the erudite one says, "How extraordinary? The one who's blind by one eye, the Muppet, what's going on?" He won the debate in an utterly genius way. "I didn't know he is a great enlightened master." So the erudite brother says, "What?" Hence, now, I must move on. In ancient Zen tradition, even the following is symbolic. If the wayfarer won a philosophical debate, he could only stay over for one single night. He could not stay longer. Why? Because this is a quality of the mind, which is not the purpose, the destination. You can stay the night, after that you go. That is, symbolically, you haven't reached your destination. You can stay one night, as you are intelligent, you're deep, and this is great. But you haven't reached the destination. This is not your home. In the morning, get out. It's symbolic, you get it? In Zen, everything is so beautiful. And it's so beautiful that Zen wasn't turned into a religion. That is, nobody believes in Zen. Zen remains a tool. Perhaps in the future someone will believe in Zen, whatever. But let's think that in the new emerging consciousness, we will go back more and more to tools, also belonging to religions that apparently have nothing to do with Zen. Thus, if you win a debate, it's a bit like the ancient Greek philosophy times. You're deep, you're intelligent, yet this is not sufficient. Esoterically, it means that the mind cannot reach the truth. The mind can only achieve something, but it cannot receive what is beyond. The mind can conquer, it is masculine, but cannot embrace. This is more related to the heart dimension that receives, that embraces. Forgive me if I make this digression, but I'd like to make you notice that both Jesus and the Buddha, and Dante Alighieri too, decided to use a very simple language. Buddha gave his speeches to a very fine India, much finer than today's India. 2,500 years ago, Sanskrit was the language of erudite people, of cultured people, of sons of kings and princes. Buddha decided to speak in Pali language. He decided it. He spoke Sanskrit fluently. In his childhood he was given Sanskrit classes at court. He knew it perfectly, and he would have impressed many by speaking Sanskrit. Yet nobody would have understood him. Only the erudite ones, the cultured ones, would have understood him. In the Gospel, Jesus is followed by simple people, rarely by erudite, cultured people. He even got accused by erudite people. The incredible thing is that Jesus was accused by men who thought they knew everything about God, not by the ignorance, not by the prostitutes, by the thieves, by fishermen. Very few erudite men followed him. And when they did, for example Nicodemus, they did it secretly. You remember Nicodemus met Jesus at night? Thus, this is very symbolic. Mahavira, another great master of ancient India, also decides not to speak Sanskrit, more or less in the same time as Buddha. This is very, very important. Thus, simplicity. The deep simplicity, whereas the mind loves complexity, superficial complexity. Remember this. We also find this in the story. Thus, if the wayfarer wins the debate, he can only stay for one night. It is symbolic. After that, you gotta go, because you haven't reached the destination. The mind can achieve something, but cannot receive what is beyond. For this reason, when someone becomes aware that the mind doesn't have this power, the heart starts to open, without any practice to open it. The heart starts to open because it starts to open up to something that cannot be understood, and it doesn't want to understand anymore. Only then it can be reached, penetrated, filled. That's the dimension of the heart. The mind, on the other hand, wants to penetrate, wants to feel, wants to reach, but doesn't open up to receive something because it is masculine, whereas the heart is a feminine quality. How do I set aside the mind? That's a question I hear often during meditation retreats and courses. You can't do anything. Everything you do is masculine, in the mind. The more you want to do something to set aside the mind, the more the mind is in your way. It is the mind that wants to set aside the mind. Why? Because the mind understood that if you set aside the mind, you are happy. Thus the mind doesn't step aside, but says, let's set aside a concept of the mind, not the mind itself. Do you understand? So when you understand that the mind can achieve beautiful things, you know I love math and physics, finest products of a fine mind. But the mind is not open to receive. Only then the mind gets strong but not important. It doesn't master you anymore. Paradoxically, the mind gets more intelligent, sharper. You understand things intuitively. You remember things appearing in your memory and you don't know where they're coming from. You didn't remember them 2 minutes ago. Now you need them and here they are. The mind is at your service. Do you remember that movie from some years ago? That's that part. Me, I didn't even remember that movie, but the mind retrieves, becomes more efficient and opened. Yet, when you know and see that the mind cannot receive the truth, at most you win a night in a monastery. One night, but you haven't arrived home. It is symbolic. Please read it symbolically. Only then it's beautiful.
Mi si è rispinto, ecco.
Before leaving, said the oldest brother, the erudite one, amazed that his purblind brother, the Muppet, won a debate against a sharp and intelligent pilgrim. He himself was probably used to spend nights in monasteries, winning one debate after the other. Before leaving, will you please tell me what happened? For sure, said the wayfarer. Firstly, I lifted up a finger to symbolize the Buddha. At that point, your incredible brother, who had to remain silent, bear this in mind. He lifted up 2 fingers, and I intuitively understood they represented the Buddha battles the Dharma, that is, his teachings. So I lifted up 3 fingers, referring to the Buddha, his divine teachings, and the Sangha, all the disciples. But at this point, your enlightened brother shook his fist in front of my face, referring that these 3 things are coming from one single hand. With these words, the astonished wayfarer left. Some hours later, the young monk appeared in front of his brother. I heard that you won the silent debate, said the oldest brother. Not at all, I won nothing, answered the other. Apologies, I need to find it again. That wayfarer was a very insolent man. How? Said the erudite brother. What happened? I'll tell it to you, but let's keep it for ourselves. Do you know what he did as soon as he saw me that incident? He lifted up 1 finger to point out that I only have 1 eye that sees. But I thought that given he was a foreigner and he seemed very intelligent, it was my duty to be polite. Thus I lifted up 2 fingers to congratulate him on having 2 healthy eyes. At this point, that insolent insisted and lifted up 3 fingers to point out that among the 2 of us, we had 3 healthy eyes. So I couldn't control myself. I became mad with anger, and I threatened to punch him in the face with this very fist. The old brother, pay attention on this final sentence. Zen is a way to understanding. You don't have to believe it or worship it. You have to use it as a good tool. The older brother laughed. This is the ending of the Zen story. It is beautiful. Wayfarer, brother blind in 1 eye, and erudite brother, They all represent three sides of us. The erudite brother is that side of us we develop life after life, and that is not who we are, because it evolves, it improves in time. It is beautiful to have one side of us that improves, and an initiate enjoys it. Remember that Socrates, an hour or two before dying, as Plato reports, he was poisoned with Sicotin. His death is famous and beautiful. Socrates asked to take a music lesson with Citra, if I'm not mistaken, a small harp. He had never played before. Someone told him, remember. Socrates was called a master. We call him a philosopher. In truth, he was a master. Someone told him, Master, you've never played. You're about to die. Why do you ask for a music lesson? Probably the student thought, Socrates is so scared of dying. He wants to distract himself by thinking about something entirely different. This is the mind of the purblind, right? Socrates answered with this very famous sentence, I repeat, reported by Plato. A life, a moment, a day in which you don't learn anything is a wasted day. And it is beautiful. Imagine how Socrates enjoyed his 1 hour music lesson knowing that shortly after he would have been killed. This is also an esoteric aspect. Death only kills that which we are not, and that which has value accompanies us also in the afterlife. Not really knowing notes or plucking the strings of Citra, but rather the wonder given by learning something new, which is the true value of learning. Wonder is a quality much more important than knowledge. In this story about Socrates, showing us that it is beautiful to enjoy what improves even though we are not that, there is no contrast. Pay attention to the teachings generating contrast. A spiritual teaching has to do with that which cannot improve in you. Psychology, psychotherapy, psychosynthesis, psychiatry all have to do with that which can improve in you, and they try to improve it. These ways are not in contrast. It is essential to see it. You can be happy about improving step by step, but you have to disenchant yourself from the idea that by improving you will become divine. The divine is already there, and it is not in time. When you see this, even only conceptually, you can play the improving game, you can take a Citra lesson, you can enjoy things. Let's go back to that side of us. The first one is the erudite brother, who knows a lot of things and knowing everything feels tired. What does this symbolically mean? It means that, knowing everything, this side of us doesn't enjoy things and dedicates its entire energy to knowing things. For example, knowing how you're supposed to live, what you're supposed to do, what you shouldn't be doing. You know, every time I give a seminar or we have a meeting, many of you are present, there's always a person asking, and what about world hunger? What about wars? What about pedophilia? There's always a person, I think it's always the same person, just changing face. And that person comes to each meeting in Sardinia, each one of them. There's always this question. We have this idea by which the mind always has to put everything in order, and we also have this idea that we would be happy if it managed to do so, which it cannot do. Happiness has nothing to do with putting things in order, but with accepting things as they are. Yet, we think that, if I have to accept things, I do not understand that I am against world hunger, otherwise I couldn't bring food to the hungry. Or I think that if I accept the existence of wars, then I have to be in favor of wars. Acceptance has nothing to do with being in favor. Acceptance is understanding that that which exists has its own purpose. But one of the reasons why something exists could be its power to push us to improve it. I can be pushed to improve something when I have accepted it. while in our society we are pushed to improve things because we do not agree with them. An initiate, we hope in the new emerging consciousness there will be always more, can change things. He can try to improve them, but he will always begin from a state of acceptance of those things. What I'm saying might not be your mind's cup of tea. An initiate can also be part of an association bringing food to 100 children in Africa who are starving in some parts of the world. But he'll know that some souls have the need to incarnate in some place where they starve. This doesn't mean that I shouldn't help my brother laying on the street in a bad condition, as the Gospel too tells. It means that I know that that brother also needs that experience. And after that, he needs my compassion helping him and trying to improve things. If you understand this, you can see that your inner contrast that you've been having for centuries disappears. Not so if you believe in it, but if you see it, it does. I can feel the urge to change things starting from a state of acceptance of those things. Nobody does this, or very few do this. The acceptance of the fact that someone might need to incarnate in a corner of the world that experiences war doesn't mean I shouldn't look for or be in favor of peace on earth. But while I'm in favor of peace on earth, it will sound absurd. I am not against war. Also, war has its purpose. I am in favor of peace, not against war. Until we are on a very low understanding level, war has its own purpose. There are souls that need to incarnate in a place experiencing war. But if you're able to bring peace in war, those souls can understand something. That means not needing war any longer. Whereas when they incarnated there, they needed the war experience. If you can see it, accepting things is not in contrast with the possibility of improving them. On the other hand, accepting things is the only way to improve them. I speak about this because it is reported in the Zen story, if you follow what I'm saying. In the history you read about in history books, big revolutions have always been made by people who didn't accept a situation and thus tried to change it. Is it maybe this the reason why history repeats? Where is this in the Zen story? This is represented by the wayfarer, wandering from place to place, winning intellectual debates, perceiving this as his own enlightenment. When the erudite brother, not the erudite, the wise brother within you, that sees with two eyes, realizes that the less wise brother has won the debate, the mind becomes less important, as we saw before. The single-eyed monk is represented by Polyphemus in Homer. Yet Polyphemus is represented as a giant with one single eye that lets you see a two-dimensional world without depth. Polyphemus is the incarnation of ego. He is the symbol of ego, and Ulysses overcomes him by saying he is nobody, by effacing himself. Contrary to the Greek story, where Polyphemus gets a spike in his eye, the Zen one has a beautiful laughter. The West is more dramatic, although it expresses the same truths, but with different languages. The Zen story is very similar in this sense. The Muppet, a bit like Polyphemus, a bit primitive. The non-developed ego, the carbon within us, manages to win something finer. But now see these. The wayfarer and the one-eyed monk, the purblind monk. Each of them had their own painting of reality. None of them saw the truth. The one said, Buddha is one, and the other, but there is also the Dharma. The first one is astonished and already understood. That's a big one. There's Sangha too. And he sees the other, but everything is one. I lost. It is his interpretation, and what is it? It is a religious painting. All right? The same story applies to the blind brother. You have just one eye. Good for you that you have two. Among us we have 3 healthy ones. That's enough! That's the simple, vulgar interpretation. This is the interpretation of the world of a primitive person. But see these, neither the first nor the second see the things as they are. Do you understand why we speak about this introducing the exercises by A Course in Miracles? Each of them has a different painting. And the third monk too has a different painting. Until he loves. Before that, he was convinced to be the erudite one, but he is tired. You go and have the debate, he says. Debates were games, they weren't important things. Pilgrims and wayfarers were given happily hospitality. So it was more like, lose, so it is over. That's the way in which he sent the brother, with lightness. The enlightenment moment happens when the erudite brother, symbol of your mind, realizes and becomes aware that each of the 2 monks has their own painting. Here we have 3 paintings, not 2. The painting, sorry about my finger, the painting of the pilgrim, the painting of the one-eyed purblind, and the painting of the erudite, wise brother, like 3 fingers. As soon as he realized that neither his brother's nor the wayfarer's paintings expressed the truth,
sapiente e quella del fratello con un occhio solo e quella del fratello e del compagno pellegrino, nessuno dei 2 rispecchiava la verità.
The oldest brother sees and becomes aware of the fist, laughing. Thus, the purblind has his version of the story, the wayfarer has his version of the story, and our erudite friend, who represents wisdom within us, manages not to have his own version of the story. Rather, he sees realities as it is when he laughs. Do you understand? We're talking about this story because we had been talking about lightness in the previous videos. As soon as he laughs about this, the oldest brother doesn't go and kick the purblind brother saying, "You understood nothing," and doesn't go to the pilgrim saying, "Please come back, actually you won." But he simply sees things as they are, not as he paints them. Here, something wonderful happens. That isn't the laughter we watch on TV. It is lightness. It is the simplicity of the one-eyed person, but on a higher level. It is the same one Buddha, Jesus and all great masters had, using a simple language. Dante was one of the first ones speaking the Volgare language, as it was called. At Dante's times in the Middle Ages, they used to speak Latin, if you were a cultured man. Writing in Vulgar was very low cost, if you were such a cultured man as Dante was. Yet, Dante decides to speak Volgare, the root of the Italian to be. And it's beautiful, isn't it? So Italian, our beautiful language that many claim finds its roots in Dante, comes from a choice of simplicity. Yet, if you read Dante, it seems very complicated, because that was the simplicity of 1300 and of 1200. Today's simplicity has changed. And if you had someone speaking like Dante today, which character would he be in the Zen story? The erudite wise brother. Yet, at those times, he wouldn't have been erudite. Dante spoke simply, vulgar, as the word reads. But if today you speak like that, wow, who do you think you are? Why is it so? Because simplicity has to evolve. In the new emerging consciousness, we have a changing simplicity, not a static simplicity. Otherwise, today you would speak just like Dante, and only Ariosto would understand you, together with Shakespeare, if he only could speak Italian. You'd just understand each other, no one else. But at those times, it was the vulgar language spoken by everyone. This is a very important hint on a higher level. Do use the mind, but do not become its slave. I see these people doing challenges with theses, antitheses. If mind can't get you to the truth, you can play with philosophy. But you understand that the mind has to open up to receiving, as it cannot achieve truth. When you comprehend, when you understand this understanding sets your mind aside. You don't have to set it aside.